we're very glad and happy to have here today Mr. Michel Jouveaux. That, I mean, before I give you, the chance to introduce yourself, I really want to share the exceptional feeling I have now talking with you. So I have to go back to my P&G days in Procter & Gamble, when calling Michel was like calling the guru of advertising. And actually, you're going to tell us more what it means, the department you're working on. I mean, jokes apart, really, it was inspiring to have you in every meeting. And if I can think about a business storyteller today that I could, ask advices or ask, his opinion for anything, that would be you. So really, that's a big pleasure for me. And I hope a big pleasure also for the audience going to listen to this talk. Michel has almost 2 decades of marketing experience, but is a kind of manager that you would not expect having a second life, because we can't really say a second, maybe in a third life. You're going to tell us more. He's also a professional musician. So he has a job that is 100% marketing, 0% music, the consulting and previous marketing in P&G, and now has a job that is 100% music and 0% marketing. Am I right, Michel?
Yeah, that's actually a really nice description. Thank you very much. Thank you for the kind words as well. Yeah, it's depending on how you want to position it, I've got 2 lives or 3 jobs. Like if you draw a line that goes from indeed 100% marketing, 0% music, to the other way around. So 0% marketing, 100% music. I've got a job at this end of the line, I've got a job at that end of the line, and I've got a job in the middle. So 3 jobs, essentially. On the far end, the far left end of the line, or right end if you're looking at the camera, the marketing side of things. I was in P&G for, I think it was 18 years, actually 11 years in classic line marketing. Yeah, you probably weren't born when I started.
No. Very kind, thank you. Very kind. Yeah. Very kind. Yeah.
And yeah, did 18 years in P&G, so 11 years in classic marketing, and then the last 7 years were spent with this small group of people that you met when it was still called ADD, Advertising Development, and then it became BBIC, Brand Building, Integrated Communications, I think. So essentially, that was the small group of people within P&G who was in charge of creating and sharing, the company's best knowledge about what it takes to build a brand, from the most strategic level, so writing and equity, to the most executional level. So pretty much, evaluating a shelf talker before it goes into production, via everything in between, writing concepts, writing briefs, helping brand teams manage their relationships with agencies and the other way around, et cetera, et cetera. So that was a great job. And in fact, that's still pretty much the job I do now as a freelancer. I left P&G, I think it's going to be 7 years ago or something. Feels like 5 minutes ago. You can take the boy out of P&G, but I'm still doing that, but as a freelancer, and that's about 1/3 of my time. So I train and advise and consult with brand builders and agencies about strategic high-level stuff like creating a brand equity or revising the brand equity, or executional things like managing an agency pitch, or helping people evaluate, brief or evaluate for creative work, etc., etc., and a lot of training as well, which has always been my thing. So that's on that side of the line. I still, it was great doing it in the context of P&G, because especially at the time, what better marketing school could you possibly think of? And I had so many friends that I still do, as a matter of fact. But I did have a side life as a musician, which I did find I didn't have enough time or energy left for at the end of the day. So I ended up still leaving P&G, which was a bit heartbreaking, but it had to be done, because there is that other side to my life, which is about music. So if you go to the other end of the line, the music end of the line, I started a rock band at the age where pretty much everybody else stops. because, you know, they're usually dead from the drugs and other forms of abuse. So we're lucky enough that we started it at an age where we're more level-headed, obviously more reasonable, and we're really in it for the music and nothing else, which is very cool. I've got other projects as well. I'm actually calling you from the studio I've got in the house. I'm surrounded. You can probably not see from the angle of the camera, but if you want later on, I'll sort of move the computer around. I'm surrounded with keyboards and machines and various pieces of music equipment. And I've been composing and producing theatre play soundtracks as well for a friend of mine who's a playwright and writes his plays like other people write films, you know, with music in his mind. And we're just about to start working on number 6 together, actually, in the space of, you know, 4 or 5 years, which is pretty exciting. So, you know, that part of my life I essentially treat like it's another job. It's about a third of my time, and I do it with the same level of involvement and demand than if it was a paying job, when of course it's not. It's kind of funded by the other job. And
so I mean, you are, I mean, I of course we're forgetting. Yeah, tell us about the job in the middle.
Well, the job in the middle is the meeting of both the marketing side and the music side. I've created a company with a friend. The company's called SoundAdvice. And what we do is we create sound and music for brands. So it can be, you know, soundtracking an ad, which is about, you know, 2/3 of the type of requests we get. But it can also be, you know, more complicated but strategic and challenging stuff, which is also very exciting. Like basically defining how a brand should sound on the basis of, you know, what the rest of the equity looks like. How do you translate a brand's desired equity into musical and sonic choices, whether it's about, you know, creating sonic assets like, you know, sign-offs and jingles, etc., or it's about defining the palette, the musical mood board, if you want, and style board feels right for the brand. And so that's the job in the middle, and it's the last third of my my professional time.
Wow, that's it's quite a
job.
I mean, I would have a question that is, how many hours do you have per day? Because we usually have 24. I don't know how many you have. Having, you know,
I don't sleep a lot.
You don't sleep at all. You just
I need my 4 or 5 hours, and I'm fine.
Yeah, you listen music.
So that helps.
And I mean, already from what you told us, we can really see, you know, the kind of the broad angle you have to look at business stories. Really, what you said at the beginning, that is helping, advisoring, and also, I mean, putting your hands on really turning ideas, brands, equity into, you know, real stories that can touch consumers, touch users, touch the audience, and somehow activate them. I really like, I mean, your expertise also on the music side. And there's also one of the reasons why we're here today talking with you. That is, you know, business stories are not only slides or numbers or bullet points. There is a big part of that to get in touch with the users and the audience. That is what go beyond, you know, the slide or whatever you're going to talk or tell to your audience. Sure. And so, I mean, the first question would have for you, that is, within the business storytelling sphere, or how do you see the role of music? How music can really play a key role to activate? Usually we say in business telling, we like to activate the audience, because entertaining an audience on its own is the role of a music director or a movie director. In business, we need to activate the audience, right? To have the audience ready to take an action we are looking for. And I think the music, I remember, I mean, some of your training in P&G that I will never forget. You were telling us that sometimes you have some drama in the copy that makes sense only with that music. So a music can play such a key role to really enable the audience to feel what you want to tell about and what you are focusing on, and then activated them. So can you tell us a bit more about how you see music within business stories?
How long have you got? I mean, you were talking about activation. What music does is it activates and amplifies your target, whoever they are, your target's emotional response to the story you have to tell. Music is pretty much the only form of information that speaks both to the entirety of your rational and emotional brain at the same time. So it conveys emotion, but at a level which is so incredibly deep. I mean, there's that joke of you never see people, screaming hysterically at a Picasso painting, no matter how beautiful it is. You do see them do that in concert venues, right? So there's a level of emotional depth that you can reach with music, which is quite incredible. But it also speaks to your rational mind at the same time, meaning music has meaning. Depending on the choice of notes and chords and beats and sounds and arrangements and production and all of the choices that go into fashioning a piece of music will have meaning in the mind of the people who are exposed to it. It's true when the music is on its own, but it's even truer when it's there to amplify the power of images.
Yeah.
And I mean, there's been, countless pieces of research about how people understand more, feel more, and remember more if you play them images with music than without. Right? And actually, the difference is actually even bigger than with words. And so the role of music, I mean, for brand builders especially, what music and sound do is they amplify the level at which whatever words and images you have to convey to your consumers in order for them to step into the story you want to tell, to amplify the impact of that like nothing else can. The classic example that I use in trainings a lot is Jaws, the shark film. Jaws without the music is a funny cardboard shark and people swimming hysterically. Jaws with the music, I don't care how many times you've seen it, it's just the most terrifying piece of filmmaking. And I mean, that's a bit of an extreme case because it's a case of the film wouldn't be very good if it wasn't for the music. What mostly happens is if you've got a good film or a very good film, then whether it's a film or it's a piece of communication that's designed to tell the story of a brand and get a consumer to get into the story of the brand, if it's good, the music will make it very good. If it's great, the music will make it incredible. If designed right? If designed with a very clear picture in mind. I mean, music is like any creative discipline. It feeds actually on that, on discipline. It feeds on the ability to, in 4 or 5 words, summarize, okay, this is what we want people to feel when they're exposed to this particular story of ours. These are the 2 or 3 emotions we want them to feel. These are the 2 or 3 tonal communication objectives. Oh, and there's that one moment in the story that really, in some way, shape, or form, the music should really underline, whether it's a climax or an anti-climax or, do it whatever you want. But that needs to be the key emotional point in the whole story, right? If you're clear on that, which is all about the brief, which is where we usually start, we kind of write it for the client and for the agency instead of letting them agonize with it for weeks. If you have that, then you can design a piece of music that is really going to make your story so much deeper and so much more rewarding for people to get into. That's what it does. It activates the emotions.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, now that you were talking, it comes to my mind that even sometimes on FMCG, fast mover consumer good commercial, you can keep recalling the jingle, the final jingle, or even the music you have, it's like really activating you beyond the images you see. That is the power of having a music that sometimes probably is one of the elements that we underestimate in terms of the power they have. What do you think?
It's funny because, I mean, what very often happens is people have an intuitive notion that, music's important and it should probably be dealt with, in a timely manner and with proper planning and discipline and budget and everything. And then everything else gets in the way. And you usually start to think about the music 5 minutes before you're supposed to go on now. Which is, it's kind of a story of our life. The beauty of SoundAdvice is that we're kind of a small structure. And so it's 2 of us plus a few trusted people that we call upon, depending on whether we're going to need this type of performance or that type of performance, right?
Yeah.
And but the beauty of having that small structure is we're pretty responsive. We're used to working in crash timings, so that's the easy part to deal with, right? I remember our absolute record is to go from first phone call with the client to film on air in 72 hours from scratch. Didn't get a lot of sleep.
That's impressive. Yeah,
but we managed.
I can imagine that.
The hardest part to manage is that it's not so much the timing, it's the fact that music can be so subjective. Everyone has a point of view on it because everybody feels something with music. And so everybody thinks that if they like the track, then it's probably good for what it's supposed to do. When really, when you're talking about using music to amplify the effect of a story, whether people like it or not, I mean, first of all, if you put 20 different people in a room and you ask them if they like, don't like, you're gonna get 20 different answers.
Yeah.
So that's not the way to do it. Second of all, what I usually tell my clients is, I'm not composing your wedding march. I'm not composing your favorite summer hit. I'm organizing sound and notes in order to amplify the impact that images that you have provided me with will have on your consumer. So what we need is to make sure that we've got the objectives in mind, how we want people to feel in 5 words tops. And now when we play the music back, we play it with the images and we go back to these words and we go, okay, do we hit the list or not? Like, don't like, sorry, don't care.
Of course. And that's personal, it's different, yeah.
That's actually the crux of it, is to take the subjectivity out of it, or as much as possible, if you want.
And I mean, that I have to ask you that, because one of your story about music, it's about probably one of the biggest composer in the music history.
Yeah.
And we had a guru of music that we both love, that is Mr. Ennio Morricone, that indeed. You were so lucky that you had, a project together, right? You work with him. We
did. Well, actually, what happened was I ended up going to his place to brief him, to his apartment in Rome, and then going back because he had written 3 pieces based on the brief, and he wanted us, so the agency director and myself, to come back and choose. which
How was it?
Well, first of all, it nearly didn't happen, because this was actually a friend of mine, an ex-P&G, called me to consult on a piece of copy that she was working on, and everybody loved it. She and the client team loved it, and the agency loved it, and every time they tested it, it bombed, and they had no idea why. And after 3 bombs, she gave me a call, and she wanted me to come in and, advise. So, what is it that we're missing? What is it that we're not seeing, right? And at the time I turned her down because I was so overloaded with work on the consulting front and the music front. And I was like, I really want to help, but I just don't know where to find the time. She was like, no, please, we'll work the agenda around whatever you're available. You just need to drop in for like an hour. And so I ended up doing it. And there was a couple of things that were wrong about the film. It was a great idea, beautiful production, beautiful everything. There was something really wrong with the voiceover that made it, sound a bit counterintuitive. There was something wrong with the benefit visual in the end, and the music didn't work at all. The music basically delivered exactly the opposite of the emotional objectives that I would have written if I had written the music brief. And the agency guys, God bless them, and they were great. They were a great team. They were Milan.
Yeah.
They really liked it, but then we had this discussion about, okay, well, for me, the 3 emotions you're trying to go for are this and this and that, and this, and your music is delivering that and that and that, which is pretty much, it doesn't work, and it's never going to work. The music is dragging the images down instead of carrying their emotional power, which was huge. And they were like, God bless them, they were actually convinced at the end of the conversation. So they said, okay, we'll have another go. Turns out that company, the company that the project was for, was still managed by its founder, an Italian gentleman in his late 80s. Turns out the guy's best friend from school was Ennio Morricone. And they had dinner together, and the boss of the company said something to the tune of, well, we have this consultant who's telling us that the music we've got in our film is shit. And Ennio Morricone said, well, I'll do it. And so the client calls me again, and she goes, so Ennio Morricone wants to do the music. I'm like, yeah, well, that's great. I mean, I don't know what you're calling me for, but, that's wonderful. And she said, well, he's got a reputation for not being an easy man to work with. And Daniele from the agency liked the way that you talked about music in the discussion, so he would feel more comfortable if you could go with him. And, she called me, it was Friday, right? Friday afternoon or something. And she said, you would need to go on Monday, and I apologize for calling you this late. And I'm like, are you kidding? You're actually asking me to go to meet with Ennio Morricone in his apartment. and have a conversation with him. I mean, the guy taught me everything, or almost, right? And so we ended up going there and meeting him, and he was the most charming and welcoming and humble man. I mean, it was just an amazing experience. And we briefed him, showed them the film and had a conversation, and Daniela was doing the translation, because unfortunately I understand Italian, but I don't speak it. And we had the most beautiful moment. It's incredible. I actually asked in the end, you know, at the end of the conversation, I was, so Maestro, do you already have an idea of how you want to approach this? He said, yeah, sure. Gets up, goes to the piano, opens the piano, sits down, proceeds to compose the thing in front of us live. And I swear to God, I mean, just talking about it now, the hair is, you know, standing on my forearms.
Goosebump everywhere.
And and I were looking at one another going, this is a once in a lifetime experience that we're having right now. So it's great. And then he called us back, so we had to go back again. And we had a nice moment together, because I noticed he had a turntable in his living room. And I'm a big fan of LP records, of vinyl. And so I searched a little online and found out he was a huge fan of Miles Davis, and so am I. And it turned out I had a really rare pressing of a Miles Davis record in my collection. And so I gave it to him next time, you know, to thank him for the hospitality.
Wow, nice.
And I swear to God, he was like my grandfather. He was like, he took the record, he was like, is this for me? And he became all teary-eyed and said, oh, this is my favorite trumpet player. And he was such a gentleman, absolutely unbelievable. And,
fantastic.
you know, I mean, I don't use the word genius often, but in this particular case, you know, how else to describe a guy like that?
I think we can all agree on that. I mean, thanks for sharing. I heard this story and a couple of times from you. And the great thing is, when you tell this story, you really activate the people listening to you, because you have such a level of emotion talking about that.
It was unbelievable. I mean,
then it comes through. Then it comes through very powerfully, and it's amazing. And lucky you that you had this experience, you know, with him. It's a great opportunity. It's a great opportunity.
Well, and because he passed away, I think a couple of years after that. So it's probably
exactly. Exactly.
I hope it wasn't me.
No, I hope so. And Michel, I mean, you have you know, this kind of really double experience. Let me put it this way: as a brand builder, as a music expert.
Yeah.
And how, first of all, how these affect your life in terms of way of approaching clients, way of building stories? Do you focus? I mean, do you think that your marketing expertise is the backbone and the music is the dressing that you put on, or do you think that the music is really your engine? And how do you, is any story that helps you, you know, to become who you are, that somehow inspires you somehow during your way?
That's a good question. I think they're equally important, both to me and personally and to my professional life. I think it's very reassuring for clients whenever you talk about brand building that you have both a strategic and a creative sensitivity, because there's always this question with the, you know, the most rock solid of strategies about how it's going to translate into creative work and into stories that actually draw more people into the brand. I mean, brand building is storytelling. You have an audience, and you have to find a leverage point that just gets them into the story of the brand and makes them not just, you know, witnesses actually anymore. That's one of the big changes versus when I started, but players, actors, participants in the story.
Absolutely.
And I think it helps me whenever we have strategy discussions about or equity discussions about what a brand should stand for. It helps me and it helps the clients be able to project, especially if there's agency people in the room, which I think is always a bonus, to be able to have that sort of intellectual ping pong as you're shaping the strategy and the equity of the brand, to start projecting what it might look like on the creative front. On the other hand, the opposite is true as well. Having strategy as an area of interest and of training, of education, really helps me in the music job. It definitely helps me in the music for ads and music for brands job, because music is only going to be effective for an ad or for a brand if you really do understand the key strategic choices that it should amplify. And I think so it helps you in the discussions with the client and with the agency, because it feels more comfortable to them to speak to people who know about music, but they know that they can understand the brand and the message that the music should be in the service of. So it doesn't feel like you're speaking a foreign language when you talk music with them, because you talk music in the context of strategy and the other way around. It also helps with the band, and it also helps with the soundtracks for theater plays as well, because it's all about defining an identity. It's all about choosing, well, in the context of the band, it's, it's the four of us together, and something sort of naturally happens when we're together. And the first few months were about trying to understand, in a way, what is that something, and put decisive, descriptive words to it in order to help us understand the sort of style that fits us naturally. Right. And then when the time comes to, I don't know, shoot a video for a song, or choose your visual for an album, or things like that, having that ability to not just be immersed in the music, but also look at it from from a couple of steps back and go, well, if this is the perception that we're trying to create because it's true to who we are, then probably that visual's wrong, but that one's right. And it's the same for theater plays, of course. If you're, reading the play is like a gigantic brief. And what you really want to find is, you discuss with the writer, or the script writer if it's a film, but you really, or the director if it's a film, you really want to understand how they want to make people feel, what kind of tone, what kind of references they have in mind. And from that, you sort of derive a sonic palette and a mood. And usually the composition is going to be anchored in that mood. I like to think about sound before I think about notes, actually. I like to think about what sonic universe a piece of storytelling is going to conjure up.
Yes.
Before I then go into, okay, let's sit down at the keyboard and, play
put in
stuff.
notes.
Yeah. So it helps both ways, actually. I think the duality I love in my professional life is precisely that. It's the ability to work on both strategic thinking and creative thinking at the same time. That's pretty much what drives me.
If it would be possible to keep this conversation for another hour, that would be 100% yes from my side. But unfortunately, we have only, a few minutes left, around 5 minutes. So I really would like, to try to consolidate a little bit some of the key elements you highlighted. So, we really talk about the power of music in business storytelling, and you really share with us great examples and how really this can amplify the message and really become, one of the enabler to activate the audience more effectively, because you touch, different elements in the quality of the conversation at different degrees in terms of engagement, in terms of excitement and activation. So I would like, for me, for all the people listening to you, if you could, identify 2, 3, 1, whatever you think, key takeouts from what you just told us. That could be probably the power of music, if I can give a title to this conversation. Which key takeouts would you highlight?
That's interesting.
So think like, when people are, it's great because we didn't really prepare this conversation, as you know. It's like we like to talk about whatever comes to our mind. And when I think about you as such a great storyteller, such a great brand builder, that also had this kind of added value to have this sensibility and this knowledge about music that really you brought to life, showing us how music can play a key role. So I'm putting myself in the shoes, people listening this conversation. It could be a startup, it could be a professional, it could be a brand builder. They probably never thought about music in the way you were describing us. So, that could be about music, could be about how you can activate the audience beyond wording and numbers.
I think that's it. Yeah. That's interesting. The answer that came to me was actually a bit broader than music. I think it's about, whatever the story you want to tell, whatever the business you want to create, whatever the professional path you want to build for yourself. I think for me, one of the things I've learned through the years, and it applies to a lot of areas actually, is find find the interesting contradiction that you're about. I remember being, and I briefly mentioned this to you in the in our call a while back. My favorite commercial of all time is the Sony PlayStation Double Life commercial from the early noughties, which I still moves me to tears every time I see it, and I've seen it hundreds of times. I've used it in trainings. I know it, and every word of the whole thing by heart. And what the ad says is basically, it's basically an ad that talks to people who used to be hardcore gamers, and they were a little bit more grown up when the PlayStation came out. So, rich enough to buy one, but obviously feeling guilty. Yeah. That other people would look at them as, even ex-hardcore gamers. They'd look at them as, no-lifers and freaks. And Sony turned that around completely in that ad and said, what are you talking about? These people tell you have no life. They have one. You have two. And I trained that ad and everything that was great about it for years before I actually realized that's actually what I need to hear. That's what I'm looking for. There is that thing with me, and I think everybody has a variation of it, that I am passionate and, I can find my way around two areas that usually people would think are kind of mutually exclusive. And one is the strategic side and one is the creative, the musical side. And I don't think I've ever been happier in my professional life than now, because I'm tapping into both. And I think if you look at most brands and if you look at most interesting stories, whether they're ads or campaigns or initiatives or insights, remember how we used to train insights? Yeah. The most interesting of these stories always have something about, there is this contradiction at the heart of them. Exactly. There's this paradox, and it shouldn't work, but it does. I think every one of us has that on some level. I think everyone has things in their skills profiles or in their areas of interest that kind of look surprising for most people, not individually, but when you put them together. And I think if you can find that, you've got a point of uniqueness that no one can steal from you. And that applies to people and their business endeavors. And it applies, I think, to the stories they want to tell. So that would be, for me, probably the broader point. The other one, I guess, and this is probably going to be the last one because I'm mindful of time, but I switched careers in my early 40s, which, most of us, at least in my generation, were brought up to think that, that's when you're either at the top or on your way to the top, and you're based whatever course you've stayed for the past couple of decades, you're going to stay there for the next couple of decades. And first of all, I think that's wrong, but it doesn't mean that, if you find that interesting point of contradiction tomorrow and it leads you down a completely different path than the one that you had imagined, then first of all, that's not an excuse not to follow the new path. But second of all, it doesn't mean that everything you've done so far is useless. It's really not. There is no way that I could be doing the music for ads thing today if it wasn't for the 18 years in P&G learning the craft of how you build a brand. No way. There is no way that, I would do what I do now if I hadn't had, the example and the teachings and the support and the friendship of the dozens of people that I've worked with or alongside for the last 25 years or something. Do you know what? I'll even go as far as to say, I've had a majority of very, very good bosses. I've had a couple of ones that, frankly, first reflex, if you look back upon the time that you worked for them, you go, do you know what, if I could go back and erase that, because it was really not enjoyable. But you even learn from the bosses that you didn't have a good relationship with. You learn from the tough spots. And so just because, that sort of change in my life happened into my 40s doesn't mean that I'm looking back on everything I did before and I go, shit, I really should have thought about this earlier, shouldn't I?
100%.
And that's not true. I couldn't be doing any of what I'm doing today if it wasn't for the 20 or 25 years before. So don't regret anything. Just learn from everything. That'd be my second and last one.
Yeah, that's this second one talks to me quite a lot. And actually, it's funny because this morning I was having a call and we were talking about, we have to reshape the brand equity of a brand that it was not anymore effective as before. And one of the advisors would say, so we have to start from scratch. And I said, you know, you need to trust the learning you had in your previous life experience. Like what Steve Jobs was saying, trust your dots, because after that, you're going to connect them. And when you connect them, all of a sudden you have some knowledge coming out, some experience on that, and then you have great results. And you phrase it in such a powerful way now on both branding side and career side that really, I think it's resonating what you said. So very powerful. Cool. Very, very powerful. And Michel, as I said, I mean, if you could, we're going to have for sure another talk, because definitely we have to, you know, deep dive a bit more. Thanks a lot really for your time. You talk about, you know, the power of music, and the last two key takeouts, I think are going to be very helpful for a lot of people, myself first. And we're going to keep in touch. So say hi to Geneva. You are there right now in Geneva?
I am actually. Well, say hi to Milan for me.
Absolutely. So a big hug. Thank you very much. Ciao, Michel. Ciao.
Ciao.